On December 17, 1997, the Ukrainian company Aerosvit operated a regular passenger flight from Boryspil, Kiev to Odessa, and then to Thessaloniki, Greece. It must be said that at that time, the future giant of the Ukrainian oligarch Kolomoisky was just gaining strength and owned only one Boeing 737-200, as well as a commercial monopoly on regular flights to Israel, Greece, Cyprus, and post-Soviet countries. Since he was not able to independently handle the passenger traffic, which included 8 routes, some of the flights were operated by leased aircraft from other Ukrainian airlines. Upon arrival in Odessa, the aircraft was changed to a Yak-42 of Lviv Airlines. According to some reports, due to a malfunction, and according to others, due to low passenger load and a more profitable flight to Larnaca. The plane switch took 3 hours. Finally, the Soviet aircraft with 62 passengers and 8 crew members took off for Thessaloniki. Approaching Macedonia airport at night in the clouds, the crew violated the approach pattern twice. Instead of following the curved trajectory, they approached the airport's boundaries at a high altitude of 500 meters and flew further. Due to a loss of orientation, the crew didn't even realize this. The controller pointed out the error in the approach and recommended returning to the airport's VOR/DME ILS scheme. VOR is a system of radio beacons that allows determining the angle between the north direction and the direction to the aircraft, combined with DME beacons, allowing to determine the aircraft's location in space. ILS, or Instrument Landing System, is a system of directional airfield beacons, allowing landing on the runway in automatic mode and by the instruments in the cockpit. The crew was confused. They requested the course from the controller. The controller replied that they could barely hear them and asked them to contact the approach controller. The aircraft continued to leave the airport's zone. The approach controller instructed the crew to climb to 1,800 meters in the northern holding zone on the outer contour of the airfield. The confusion after the loss of orientation continued. In addition to the regular crew, an instructor pilot was present in the cockpit. His legitimate question, "Where are we flying?" caused an irritated remark from the flight engineer, "Don't shout." The crew attempted to tune into the VOR beacon and continue the approach. VOR is an abbreviation of Very High Frequency Omnidirectional Range, a type of short-range radio navigation system used by aircraft. It allows pilots to determine their position and stay on course by receiving signals from a network of ground-based radio beacons. Pilots were speaking to each other and the flight dispatcher. "So what course should we follow? Check. To the right. There's your VOR. I've set the ARC, automatic radio compass of the aircraft. Set the VOR. Take the course to it, head to the VOR. Which VOR? So, to the left to move, dispatcher. State your position. Pilot, 6,000 feet, 5 miles from the VOR. The dispatcher said, maintain 6,000 feet. Report when passing SLM VOR. Hold at 6,000 feet, Lyosha. At this point, the flaps were set to 20 degrees. The flight continued in climb mode, but with this flap configuration, there were difficulties reaching the required altitude. Pull up, please, I can't." The crew spent the next 3 minutes mainly adjusting and deciphering the cockpit avionics. The controller, after repeated requests for the aircraft's location, gave the instruction to descend. "Are you north? Continue in that direction, descent to 4,500 feet, pressure 1035, and a few minutes later he allowed descent to 3,500 feet, with further communication with the landing flight dispatcher. Afterward, the crew tried to clarify the beacon frequencies, courses, and altitudes. Which beacon? Is the radar working? Ask him. Ask for vectoring. Stop. I don't understand what you've selected. What course are we following? 270. Let's leave. Turning to 160. Request vectoring. The aircraft crew asked the controller, requesting direction vectoring. The dispatcher replied, "There's no radar guidance here, sir. No, we cannot. We cannot provide radar guidance. Follow the airport's VOR/DME ILS approach scheme to runway 16. Pilot confirmed." The controller asked, "AW241, are you familiar with the approach scheme? Pilot, now, performing VOR. 3,500 feet, confirm." The controller responded, "Yes, sir. Set beacon reception at 3,500 feet. Then perform the ILS approach to runway 16 to the minimum, to the written minimum." Later, the controller would be found guilty of the tragedy and convicted by a Greek court. Doubting the crew's spatial orientation, he could have requested assistance in vectoring the aircraft from the military sector at the CD's base, which was literally across the road from Macedonia Airport and had a circular radar. The crew continued to discuss navigation and orientation difficulties in the cockpit. "So, Lyosha, let's orient ourselves. We're following the outer contour of the radar on a course of 210 degrees. So, where should the radar be?" "It's behind us. We should turn left, connecting to the radar." "So we're turning right, heading to the radar." The crew retracted the flaps, maintaining speed and altitude. When the controller asked for altitude, the crew reported 3,500. The controller asked, "Understood? Have you established beacon reception?" The pilot replied, "We're turning right to the beacon." For 4 seconds, a ground proximity warning sounded in the cockpit. The dispatcher asked, "AEW241, do you see the airfield?" At this moment, the ground proximity warning sounded again, followed by alarmed voices inside the cockpit. "Continue climbing, climb. The danger ground light is on the panel." "How much altitude did you say to climb?" The plane crashed into the slope of Mount Pentepigadier at an altitude of 1,005 meters, 72 kilometers from the airport. All 70 people on board perished. For 20 minutes, the controller continued trying to contact the aircraft. Military radar stations at the CD's base were alerted and search and rescue services were put on standby. Due to weather conditions, the crash site was accidentally discovered from the air only 3 days later. During the search, a Greek Air Force C-130 crashed due to bad weather, killing its crew of 5. The Greek Investigation Commission concluded that the primary responsibility for the incident lay with the crew. They were not sufficiently trained and qualified to perform this flight. Additionally, the pilots did not report the loss of spatial orientation to ground services. However, the Ukrainian side disagreed with the conclusion, citing violations by the Greeks of Annex 17 to the 1944 Chicago Convention, which outlines the procedure for investigating aviation incidents. The catastrophe was also exacerbated by the fact that the approach chart inaccurately depicted the military radar. This created a false belief in the crew about the presence of radar service at the airport and the controller's ability to vector them during the approach. Over the following year, legal battles ensued between Aerosvit and Lviv Airlines. As a result, the Lviv company was recognized as the actual operator and carrier of this flight with full responsibility, although they were not a party to the contract for regular flights to Greece, under which the Boeing 737 could not be replaced with a Yak-42. So why did the plane crash while attempting to land at Thessaloniki airport? The crew made several navigation errors, lost spatial orientation, and failed to follow correct landing procedures in poor weather conditions. The air traffic controller, who did not provide radar guidance, was also blamed for not seeking military assistance, which could have helped prevent the crash. The investigation pointed to the crew's lack of training, but the Ukrainian side challenged the findings, citing procedural violations by Greek authorities. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful or learned something new, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more in-depth analysis of aviation incidents. Let me know your thoughts on what went wrong in the comments below. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.